It's Kelly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There's no members here at SARC,
Okay.
just so you know. But
Okay.
Deborah Hollins is now in Zoom. She's signing in right now.
Okay.
And as far as I knew this afternoon, we did have quorum.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself. Okay, Councillor Martin?
Yeah, that's fine. I guess I will ask, how many do we need for a quorum?
Quorum for this committee is 6.
Maybe postponed.
No.
I know.
They still have 2 minutes to get here.
We'll give them a few minutes. It's beautiful, though. We've been waiting a long time. Oh, we've got Rachel. Hello.
Hello.
And it's Jocelyn, is it?
Yeah, I'm just renaming myself. Hang on.
Look after that. I'm going to call the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness for June 22nd, 2022 to order. I would like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nations. And I would first like to ask if there's any introduction of late items.
Yes, I have one, which is an update on an accessible mat at Departure Bay.
And would we put that near the end of the agenda?
Sure.
Under other business? Okay. I'll put that under number 8. And with that, if I can get a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended.
So
Moved by Rachel, seconded by Jocelyn. All those in favor? Thank you. And do I have somebody to adopt the minutes? Have I got Rachel? And looking for hands, I've got Adrian. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, first on our agenda is presentations. And we have Wendy Hall, and I'm looking for Wendy.
I'm here.
Okay.
So if you'd like to move up to the table, it'll be easier for them to hear and see you, especially over Zoom. Thank you.
And I know some of you, I know Deb.
Is the camera this way? The camera will point at the table. To you.
Okay, over here. Okay.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah, if you take the chair, the camera will see you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
All right, we have 10 minutes. I have
And
10 pages to read in 10 minutes, okay.
I will just introduce Wendy, who is the chair of the Central Island Community Council with Community Living for BC. And she is going to provide us with a verbal presentation regarding the CLBC and the services that they provide to our community. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you, Zenny. Actually, my co-host is, you can introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name is Rita Hall and I'm a facilitator at Community Living BC.
And as you introduced me, thank you, Zenny, we have met before. I am the chair, as you mentioned, of the CLBC Community Council, and I have 4 children, and I'm lucky enough, 3 out of 4 have a diverse ability.
Yeah, we just wanted to say thank you for having us here today. And we just want to tell you a little bit more about Community Living BC, also known as CLBC, and what we do. So CLBC is a Crown corporation and we receive our budget from the BC government each year. Community Living BC supports people in British Columbia who are 19 years old and older and who have a diagnosis of a developmental disability or have a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder or autism spectrum disorder and have a hard time doing things on their own with day-to-day tasks. CLBC, we start our services at age 19 years old. However, we do start planning for eligibility and start planning with transitioning youth as early as 16 years old. We're a voluntary service and our service supports all of those with a transition into adult services. And our biggest goal is to support individuals have lives filled with possibilities and welcoming communities.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm the chair of the Community Council with CLBC. And one of the things, well, there's many things we do. One is doing presentations to this, and also we did a presentation to the City Council, and we got Zenny to come to a meeting. Zenny, and there was someone else who came to one of our Community Council meetings. Do you remember, Zenny?
I don't, I have to say right now.
I went to it. I went to it.
Right.
That would make
Yes,
sense that it
yes,
would be
thank you.
myself and Cheryl.
Yes, so you came to a meeting, and one of the things they suggested, I don't know whether it's you or someone on council suggested, that we actually come to this meeting, committee meeting, so we can share
Yes.
more information. We also recognize people in the community who go above and beyond their job. Like sometimes it's a workplace and they've hired people with a diverse ability. Sometimes it's a worker who works with people, individuals, and they have gone above and beyond what they said to do. And we meet once a month, and if somebody else would like to come to one of our council meetings, it would be in September, would be the next one to come to. And that's the last Tuesday of every month at 3:30. And we've left some information here for everybody to pick up. And just go ahead.
Yeah, and so as you may have seen in your inbox that was shared with you, hopefully, we just did a visual of some of the topics that we wanted to highlight today. And so I'm just going to quickly go over it, and then Wendy is going to go into it in more detail. But we're wanting to look at the ideal future. We're wanting our community to be welcoming, inclusive, and accessible. And so some of the topics we wanted to bring up is things like looking at inclusive public washrooms and having Braille on the outdoor of the washroom so that visually impaired individuals are able to identify what washroom that they're going into. Another thing we wanted to look at, we have noticed that there's a lot of things in our community that are really positive and that are moving forward into a more accessible and inclusive community. For example, the wave activated lights that were just installed for crosswalks with the voice countdown. I mean, that's fantastic, and we're really excited about that, as well as steps forward to inclusive parks in our community. And so some of the other things that we wanted to discuss is accessible trails, and like I said, Wendy was going to go into it in more detail, but accessible parking, inclusive housing, as well as looking at a 5-year application for the LEAP card, the Leisure Economic Access Pass, This is just so popular and such a good program for the people that we support. However, it has been a barrier to go through the application process, and to do it annually has been really challenging. And so we're really hoping that we can look at having a 5-year application for those on persons with disabilities income.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to address is the parking, accessible parking. We've noticed there's quite a few parking places around Nanaimo that are not accessible. They're the same width as a regular one, and they just have the symbol on there, which is not inclusive. And we, COBC, is proposing that the service providers who transport these individuals around to actually do a survey of Nanaimo, and we'll do this only if the council will take this into account and act on it, because there's no point in doing something around the community if it's not going to be acted on. One of the ones, there are several malls. I don't know if you cover the malls or not, but there's several malls that have just, and I don't know how to do that, whether you go to the individual malls. And one of the ones that somebody said was at Matthew Sutton. Apparently the accessible parking there does not work. That's the one example, and there's many more. And if you have an idea on how to do the mall parking, if you could let us know. So I just need to know an answer on that. The Leap Pass is, I know it's for low-income families. Everybody on PWD and on services for CLBC are eligible. I don't think there's many people who are not eligible. And we would like to see this done every 5 years, renewed every 5 years, for people who are on PWD and qualify for CLBC services. Because as Breacher said, it's really hard for them to do it every year. So that's one thing we would really like to see move forward. The Braille, as you mentioned, we have an individual who is visually impaired and just about walked into the ladies' washroom because there was no Braille. I don't know which washroom it was. I think it may have been the one down at Matthew Sutton. He just about walked into the ladies because there's no Braille on it. Fortunately, somebody was there, but he wouldn't have seen anything anyway, so that's beside the point. The telegraph poles in the sidewalks is another issue that we have come across, not only for people who use a wheelchair to get around, but also for mothers pushing the pushchair around. Sorry, that's an English term.
Stroller.
Sorry, I'm a limey. Yes. So if there's anything that can be done about that, and making sure the sidewalks are wide enough, because sometimes the bushes on the side of the road, on the side, people having their hedges, they come over into the sidewalk, so the sidewalk gets narrower and narrower as it comes out. The other thing I want to talk about is the inclusive, it's a different slide, the inclusive intergenerational living that has just been put out. Now I know this was in the seniors section of the newspaper, but there was no mention of people with diverse abilities in this. And it's really important that that happens, that it's not just for seniors, to have it for people on low income, like people on PWD. I'm hoping that everybody has watched the video of, is it Lisa's story that I forwarded to, that got forwarded to you? It was a building happening in Surrey, and what the Surrey mayor said, which really shocked me, that he said that people with those kind of people, or something like to that effect, need to be where the homeless are. And that is why this program did not go through, which is disgusting. And I'm hoping that this doesn't happen here in Nanaimo. I will be listening. I will be listening. Don't worry. And the other thing is, have you noticed, you probably have, how many apartments are being built right now? There's hundreds of them. Wherever I go, oh, there's a new apartment just going up here. But how many spaces are there for people like the people on PWD and CLBC services? How many are accessible? What I would like to see, or we would like to see, is having every building that is put up is to have so many reserved for people on low income, because they can't afford like the amount, some of the rent is like 1,000, 2,000, and it's quite hard for people to move out of their home. I still have my daughter at home. She can't afford to move out. So that's something I would like the city council to do, is to make every single plan, not individual homes, but every single apartment, to have so many set aside for people with diverse abilities and spread throughout the whole of Nanaimo. Not having a congregate of, we're going to build this building and this is just for people with diverse abilities. No, it needs to be spread around Nanaimo, preferably on the bus route. And I think, have I talked long enough?
I think so. I think you're at your 10 minutes.
Yeah, I probably am. I like to talk.
We also, we'll just leave here, we have our integrated service manager's business card, Lisa Evans, who's wanted us to share that with you in case you wanted to follow up with anything we brought forward today. And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and so just let us know if you're willing, if the council's willing to look at the parking and whether we can get our service providers out to do that. And also let us know if somebody would like to come and see us at the community council in September. And I think that's it. Oh, one more thing.
And before, we do have a few speakers who would, I'm assuming, like to ask questions.
Okay.
Right? There are a few of these items that we're actually already working on. You might be, inclusive washrooms and the LEAP program, not necessarily to a 5-year, but we're looking at expanding it to at least a 2-year. We've made the whole process much simpler, right?
Sorry to interrupt, but it's on the computer. And not everyone has access to the computer.
No, it's not on the computer. No, it's not. There's actually very easy forms that can be completed that does not have to be done online.
Okay.
So but the staff can be in touch with you about that part, right? As for malls, they're private property. It's not something that city would be involved in, but that doesn't mean you can't write a letter and inform and educate the mall owners on this is what we need for accessibility. So I'm sure that you could work with them, but there is some difference between what powers council has for public facilities and what power we don't have with private individuals. But before I speak too long, there are other speakers. So I've got a speakers list. I've got Jocelyn, Rachel, and then Cheryl. So first, Jocelyn.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presentation. And as Zenny said, it's actually nice to see that a lot of these priorities are things that we've been talking about on the committee as well. I have a physical disability. I use a wheelchair, and the parking issue is one that I encounter a lot as well. And I think it's one that we might hear a bit more about in the future. And it's super complicated because now it's municipal, but the city only owns so much of the property. I know Spark BC has done some work on advocacy campaigns about it, which I was involved with. So that might be of interest to you. But my question is, aside from low income, is there anything we should know about the types of housing that your members most need?
So obviously accessible, meaning using a wheelchair to get around. But some of them, they have challenges around maybe cooking or something like that. So when the stove is included, making sure that it's not one that they can turn on and put their hand on. Like this, the person I'm thinking of is blind, and he cannot know. He would have to feel to see if it's on or not. That's one of the things. And making sure it's accessible, ground floor, not too many flights to go up to, not having an elevator so he can just walk into a place and it's easy to find, you know, he walks with the white cane. So that's another thing. Can you think of?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, I mean, CLBC supports a wide range of individuals who are eligible for CLBC, and so, I mean, I think anything that is available that's affordable for those on PWD, but if there are options to have some that are accessible, that's wonderful, because that's really, really hard to find, especially that are in their price range. But like I said, I mean, if there was something on the top floor, I mean, we definitely have people who would be suitable for a place like that. So I think anything that is affordable, we will have somebody to be able to support to go in would be great.
And also having a place that they could have a second person in there, because some of them need support. So having a second bedroom so they can have a live-in support. Not everybody needs that, but some of them really do need that. And lighting is another issue with some people with autism.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel.
Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation. I think we've touched on like all of these topics at some points, but some of them not as in depth as your presentation. So thank you again. I actually had an interesting chat with some members of the, oh shoot, I can't remember what department from the city a couple weeks ago about reporting issues, accessibility issues. And so I'm actually transitioning from using a walker to using a wheelchair to get around. And I've been putting off contacting the city about the curbs outside my house. Like I can't access the crosswalks because there's curbs blocking them from the gravel sidewalk. Super smart, it's not. So I didn't know how to contact them. I was stressing about it. I kept putting it off. I just found out they have a report a problem form on their website, and that they send those reports to the appropriate departments for them to actually be dealt with, which is pretty impressive. But like nobody knows about this function. So I think that maybe you guys could like also advocate to the city to have them like advertise it more, and to start having nonprofits and similar organizations be educating their clients and customers about being able to report on their own as they come across issues, or having their carers report, and making sure people are aware of the tools.
Okay.
So I specifically thought of that for your parking, but also, you know, kind of educating people on what's public parking and what the city has no control over. So yeah, thank you again. That was amazing.
Thank you. Cheryl.
Well, thank you. One of the things that came up at the meeting I attended to, we talked about the ability to put a tiny home in on some lots where the person then has their own freedom, et cetera, but they're still there, like the parents are still there, or the other caregiver to go out and help as required. Is this something you guys could push forward and advocate for? Because right now, of course, we don't allow that unless your lot's over a certain size. So I think that's something that needs to be brought forward, like from a group, or even maybe from this committee, that we look at that. What are the possibilities? I know Zenny and I have talked about, you know, the tiny home concepts, because a lot of people just want their own bedroom, and like you said, just a tiny little fridge maybe there, or maybe a microwave for whatever reasons, but they still have the safety of being close to home. So that's something I think that needs to be pushed, you know, harder by the community. My second point was when you talked about accessibility suites, private developments, again, we can only control so much, or they just won't build here. We've heard that. But many of them do put in 1 or 2 suites per development because they get bonus points. It's all done on a bonus thing. So that is something that could be looked at further. But I know a lot of developers don't do it, and they just won't, and they don't need to right now because the push is so high for builds that we're just struggling to get anything we possibly can. But very valid points. And the other thing that I've been pushing, and I'd like to see more of, is 3-bedroom apartments, because there's a lot of families that are stuck living in a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom with four kids or whatever. So we're pushing the development community in different areas. So there's certain things we can do, certain that we can't. Like we can try and provide incentives, but really good, valuable points. And keep up the good work, because you guys are doing amazing work advocating for your groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Deborah.
Thank you so much for sharing those videos. I found those incredibly enlightening. Are those on your website?
No, I don't think they're on our website. No, I
think that would be a great idea in terms of helping to educate the public into some of these issues. I think having those videos available. I'm wondering though, I can't remember if it was Councilperson Zenny or Cheryl who talked about private versus public for the parking stuff. Is there any influence the city has around signage? Because for safety reasons. So, in one of the videos, it talks about, the space between the cars and making sure that the parking is not parking space isn't going into a busy lane. I'm wondering if there is bylaws around safety for people that we may be able to influence some of those things. Thank you.
And before I move to Lisa, Cheryl's got her hand up. I think she has a response to that.
I think on part of that, it's where you have to go, and it's terrible, but you have to go to the Human Rights Tribunal. That's basically what you have to do, because we don't have a lot of control over signage on private property. We control over how much confront, like on the highway or on streets, but on private property, it becomes a little bit more difficult because most of those signs are going to be conforming, right? But where the most of the successes come from, if you look at what's going on in Victoria with their sidewalks or their crosswalks where they raised them and they caused all the problems for the blind people, that was a challenge to the Human Rights Tribunal that came back, and the person was successful and said, you need to be more inclusive when you make these designs. And then because it's a Human Rights Tribunal, then we have to do stuff. The other area that you might want to look at, and I just throw it out, like if there's employees working in that area, is you can go under WorkSafe as well. Yeah, so there are different options. I mean, they're more difficult, but I mean, the Human Rights Tribunal, they'll walk you through everything. And there's advocates that will help you do your complaint up. So I think those are options to look at, and they've got a lot more teeth than a city.
And I'm going to go to Lisa.
Hi, thanks very much. I just wanted to make sure thank you again for your presentation. And I'm going to ask Deb back to take some notes and connect with you, because we are undertaking a family-friendly and an accessible and adaptable housing study with the aim of council bringing to council policies that would do exactly what you're asking for, with looking at having private developers have a certain number of units that are both family friendly, so that's 3 units and up, and then the other one accessible and adaptable, and differentiating between the two, and also looking at what are some ways we can incent private developers to increase the rate or the number of units that meet those needs. So I think it'd be really important that you are involved in that. And so Deb, if you can make note that we'll ask the consultants once they're retained to reach out to CLBC, I think that would be awesome. Thank you.
Zenny, I was just going to add to both those videos that Deborah was asking about. Perhaps we can throw them in on our notes under our accessibility area so that they're available if anybody wants to go look. There'd be a spot on the city website.
Okay, I think we can ask for that. And the other thing I was just going to mention around the housing is a lot of the new developers and the presentations we do see, they are showing a portion, like they're in point systems, and I'm not sure the complexity of it, but they are recognizing that the need for accessibility on the first floor, et cetera, and actually making the interior of the building so it's accessible as well, as you were mentioning, stoves and et cetera, the appliances. Another thing, and I think Cheryl and I are both on this page, and it will only go if we're on a new council, but we have consistently advocated for rent-to-income housing. I would love to see that we could incentive developers at 20% of all new developments are rent-to-income housing, whether you're disabled or senior or part of the working poor, right? But that's something that will be something we can continue to work on. But the city is aware of the needs, definitely. And we have a full agenda. Lisa, did you have anything further to add? Nope. So I thank you for your presentation, the information. It felt good to know that a lot of the things you're speaking of, we are working on. Doesn't mean we can't do more and can't do better. But thank you for coming and spending this time with us. I'll move on to
Thank you very
next.
much.
You're welcome. I'll move on to the next on the agenda is off-street parking regulations bylaw 2018 number 7266. And Jamie Rose, our manager of transportation, is going to provide us a PowerPoint presentation and some information. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you very much. So I'm not sure if this is, there were some plants here, but there are a lot of good pre-discussion before getting into this, because when we were talking about the agenda development, we actually were a little bit fuzzy on what was being what information was sort of being sought. And so we thought that the most appropriate place was to start with something that we've actually just been hearing about, and that is the parking as it relates to commercial businesses and residential dwellings, multifamily and single family off-site. And so this is bylaw 7266 is the tool that actually gives us the authority to ask for not only just the number of parking spots for development, but also the size and location for accessible spots. And so we do actually have some requirements for dimensions. I did not include them in this, but there's there's tables within the bylaw that talk about this wide and this deep, and there need to be X number based on what the composition of the building is. And so I think that it would probably be helpful if there's any questions to sort of take a look at that. And the one thing that has come up historically with this is the language around the location of accessible stalls. I think the wording we use is convenient or with maximum grades surrounding it. Unfortunately, that leaves a little bit of interpretation, and I've seen some examples that really don't fit the spirit of it. But at the end of the discussion on this topic, I think what I would hope to hear, and we can talk about that after I finish the slide deck, is what additional information I could share in the future, or if there's any reviews or discussions that may be of interest to this committee. So the next topic I wanted to touch on was an update on our transit stop accessibility working group. We've been working through this and had some meetings over the last few months, and we're just this is a brief sort of touch point to explain that and talk about what has taken place, and confirm what our plans are to move forward. So after we struck the committee, we've got two members from this, or struck the working group. We've got two members from this committee, plus we've got representatives from the city, BC Transit, and the RDN. We did a comparison between the different agencies' documents and talking about how they integrate transit facilities into our road system. The image on the left is the BC Transit, or an excerpt from the BC Transit guidelines. The bottom right is from our Complete Street Design Guidelines. And when we did a bit of a synthesis, we did find that the form and character is very, very similar. There's some subtle differences between the dimensions, but for all intents and purposes, they do provide the same space allocation, the same transitions between sidewalk, cycle track, bus loading and unloading area, plus also staging areas. And so once we've did that, we actually did a tour of the city to review a variety of our current bus stops. We stopped at Front Street, Country Club Mall, Woodgrove Mall, and Bruce and Albion. And so we got a sampling of some of our new builds, some of our constrained new builds, some of our existing complete builds, but old standards, and then some examples that are just incomplete streets. And so there's some pretty glaring takeaways from some of our older infrastructure. The bottom right picture here is of the Country Club Mall exchange, and it really highlights how inadequate our sidewalks are. They're cluttered with infrastructure, and they really don't have any areas to stage and to load and unload. And so it was really, it highlighted how valuable that additional space we've outlined in our new standards is. And so the image on the left is at Bruce and Albion. Unfortunately, you can't see through the bus to the other side of the street, but there is a bus stop on the other side of the street, which is completely inaccessible. It's a gravel shoulder. And so if the bus stops away from the edge of the shoulder, it can lower the ramp, and it is theoretically possible, but getting to and from it is a real barrier. And so really our takeaway from that was those locations which are incomplete are really, they're tricky, and they really require a site-by-site design. And so that was part of the pedestrian unallocated that we reported on last year. So we've allocated a portion of that to addressing some of these. We've got a bunch that are in stream, and working with BC or RDN Transit, to prioritize those and remove those barriers. So some of the key takeaways: retrofits are going to be challenging case by case. The identification of them. This was something. So one of the approaches we've taken to this, or prior to this discussion, was looking at bus stops based on current ridership, and it was sort of pointed out to us that ridership may not actually be the best metric, because not seeing somebody there doesn't mean that they don't want to go there. And so we really need to sort of revisit our process for determining when and where we should be focusing our efforts. At our new locations, the visual cues is a really high priority, and we really need to make it very clear that all of the information is universal and informative for everybody. Sidewalk widths is also paramount. It's also critical to have the marshalling area so that we're not having overcrowding or conflicts that sort of with spillover, and ensuring that everybody gets has the space and access that they need. So at this point, what we're expecting to do is to work with take the working group and develop a summary of what we've done, what we've learned from this, and highlight some action items to move forward, and present that at an upcoming meeting in the fall. And so, yeah. If there's any questions on either of these topics, I'm happy to take them or get any feedback.
He has to. Oh yeah, I think he's trying. All right.
I didn't realize I was muted. Rachel.
Hi again. Okay, I know I said that the working group, but I was having a hard time getting my words out. So maybe part of the resolution of the working group could be coordinating with the city and BC Transit and the RDN to put the information out where riders can see on how riders can contact the city or the RDN. The RDN is the regional district of Nanaimo, right?
Yeah.
On reporting an inaccessible stop or an inaccessible curb, like maybe the whole stop's good, except you just can't get up onto the platform where you're supposed to load the bus. So like having that like in bus schedules or like on the signpost where the schedule is like tacked up on the stop, you know, like maybe just like something so people actually know how to do this, because I've been stressing over this myself for months. That stop you stopped at Bruce Albion, that's very near where I live. I can't access that gravel stop there. So I didn't know this existed until I asked about it 2 weeks ago. So I think there needs to be like some public awareness there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Jocelyn.
Thanks so much for this. It was really informative to be part of that working group. And I think there's a few kind of struggle points that I think are going to need a little more thought or change in the surroundings to sort of like at Country Club for brighter people than me, but I found it really illuminating. My question is about parking. My understanding is that I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, the province sort of downloaded the parking responsibility for parking and accessibility of parking from the building code to the municipalities. I don't quite understand exactly how it all went down, but even back then, my organization was trying to advocate for an update to accessible parking standards, because vehicles are bigger, there are more power chair accessible vehicles, but they require more space on the driver's side or the passenger side. And I think I was one of the people who asked for us to talk about this topic. And one part of that is what levers does the city have with respect to setting a tone for what is accessible in the city around parking? Because, obviously the city has its own property and own parking you can control, and then you also approve developments. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering how, as is so common to happen, how accessible parking becomes not accessible over time and lack of signage or changes in the parking lots. A human rights tribunal challenge is essentially a very blunt instrument. And I really would love to see a way that we could, even in small ways, sort of nudge, parking in Nanaimo toward more accessibility, even if it's the old standards.
So the bylaw 7266 or 7266 is the basis that we use for approvals, as you pointed out. And if a building isn't built to that standard, then we have mechanisms to intervene and correct it. Where things get a little more difficult is as buildings or parking lots age, because we don't actually have depending on how they change, we don't necessarily have a mechanism to be made aware of it. So if a renovation is taking place and a building permit or a design permit has to be issued for it, we will become aware of it. We will have inspectors that go out and say, yes, it meets the requirements and everything's okay. But it's not uncommon for surface lots just to be restriped. And it may, truthfully, it may be just an oversight or a mistake, and people change their parking lots, try and reconfigure them to make them better for some other purpose, but in the process, interfere with the accessible stalls. And so I think that We have the tools to make the designs correctly, and if our designs aren't meeting the needs right now, we have the ability to change that. So we can take our bylaw, back it up, and go, okay, does this still work, or does it need to be fixed? I think one of the conversations that took place maybe 3 or 4 months ago was ensuring that there is a discussion about what was it? Ensuring that accessible stalls would also be electrified. And so that's not language that's in the bylaw right now, but with so many transportation things, times are changing and technology is changing so fast that we need to keep updating these things. And so that's already on my radar for an item that needs to be revisited. I think that it's probably quite appropriate to suggest a review, a detailed review. Maybe the same working group for the transit could even take a look at this and sort of say, okay, is it a substantive change, or is it just some minor amendments to get some dimensions back in place, and take it from there, and then we can report back and say, no, it's just some minor revisions and we can deal with that, or nope, this is a wholesale change and we need to revisit a bunch of things, which then kicks over a new process. But we can absolutely do that. That's what this tool's here to do, to make sure we have all of these things in place. So we do have, as I say, where things do become a bit of a challenge for the city is these sort of down the road experiences when a facility has been in place for 15, 20 years, and we don't have a trigger to go back and look at it and make sure that it is still set up the way it was intended. So,
right. I would love to be part of that. If I was part of something last year in comparing several different provincial accessible parking bylaws, Newfoundland, Ontario, and BC, as well as the CSA. And there was some really interesting stuff there. And, at the very least, even if we can, make sure the standards are as best as they can be for our new builds in Nanaimo, I think that would be a contribution.
Yep, absolutely.
Just to follow up on that, so has the parking sizes been enlarged, or I was hearing about they needed to be wider because wheelchairs aren't always back access, it's side access, etc. Have we amended those?
I can't say if we've changed them. I believe the space width now is 3.7 meters with a minimum aisle width off of that. But I can't say if that's new or if that's what it's historically been. But as I said, that would be a pretty straightforward update that we could execute once we know what the dimensions need to be.
And Cheryl.
Yeah, I can tell you that when we got Terry Weens, who was a strong advocate for accessibility issues back in 2017 actually, brought forward the issue at Collery Dam, and as soon as Parks was notified, they rectified it. So it's all about notifying and making sure so that we know, and then they did rectify it so that they could use the, it was so narrow you couldn't get a wheelchair out of a side loader, so they did make it wide away a spot. So it's a matter of sometimes just letting us know, and I know staff is very responsive to getting that done. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for that information and feedback. I will go on now to our delegations, which is number 6, and it's Hannah Dundney. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Master in Arts student in Sustainable Leisure Management Program with VIU. And she's going to provide a PowerPoint presentation regarding park crowding from the perspective of people with mobility-related disabilities. And Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'll share my screen here. Okay, thank you so much for letting me come here and talk, and it's nice to see you all. This is my first time in one of these meetings, so it's very exciting. So I'm here today to tell you a little bit about my master's research, and I'll be exploring the experiences of park crowding for people with mobility-related disabilities. So before I tell you a bit about that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name's Hannah. I'm doing my master's here at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo, and I'm doing it in sustainable leisure management. So the purpose of my thesis and kind of my life goal is to provide service for people with disabilities and make outdoor recreation accessible and available to all. So I'm here today. I'll tell you a bit about myself. My background in education is sociology of health and aging. I also have a degree in travel and tourism. Now I moved on to my master's, but I also have a background working with non-for-profits like Life After 50, the Alzheimer's Society and Best Buddies, and as well as accessibility work for the National Park Service. So my master's thesis is going to be focusing on inclusivity and accessibility in popular nature spaces. And I'll be looking at concerns of park crowding in a way that hasn't been done before. And hopefully by doing that, I can include voices of people with mobility-related disabilities in these discussions. So you might be wondering what park crowding is. Now, although park crowding may not happen year-round in cities like Nanaimo, I think many residents in Nanaimo have experienced park crowding, especially in summer seasons around the island, as well as on mainland, lower mainland BC as well. So this is when nature spaces have so many visitors that the visitor experience begins to suffer for it. So this is a very personal and subjective experience, and it's different for everyone. So it's important to explore park crowding from different perspectives. And currently the literature has only explored one general perspective and just loosely touched on other ones. So I'm hoping to see how park crowding can affect accessibility in popular parks. So why am I focusing specifically on the experiences of people with mobility-related disabilities? So people with disabilities are largely still missing in tourism conversations and policymaking, especially in terms of outdoor recreation research and specifically park crowding research. So my study will specifically focus on people who use mobility aids, although that does not cover the wide range of mobility-related disabilities. That's what I'll be focusing on for my research specifically. And park crowding has the ability to affect the ease of mobility in spaces, and additionally, important is the social experiences in nature that are affected by this. It also has the opportunity to affect the predetermined accessibility ratings and standards that are put in place. So my study will be viewing park crowding from a different perspective. It'll be one of the first studies to do it from, to explore park crowding in this way. And I'll hopefully be able to compile inclusive suggestions for management teams to plan parks in better ways and hopefully make some changes in parks in the future. So another reason I'm here is because I am looking for participants for this study as well. I'm looking for adults 19 years or older with any mobility-related disability. But as I mentioned, they must use a mobility aid, such as a wheelchair, cane, scooter, but that's not an exclusive list. And they have to have experienced park crowding before, but it doesn't have to be on Vancouver Island. It could have been anywhere, as long as they have experiences to draw upon, to speak about in the interview. So they must be willing to meet in June, July, or August this summer in any park on Vancouver Island of their choice. So that is just a very quick overview of my study. I have many, many things I could talk about, so please feel free to reach out to me just for any discussion, or feel free to scan the barcode for my email address, send me an email. You yourself are interested in participating or know anyone who is. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. And what interesting studies you have. And I'm just going to ask for the PowerPoint, and then I might be able to see if anybody has any questions. Which I'm not seeing any questions at this time. So I will assume that everybody has gathered the information that you provided that is on the screen. And be in touch with us about what you find out.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to number 7 of the agenda is reports, and we've got Mr. John Van Horn, our Director of Human Resources, regarding our gender diversity and inclusion recommendations that we just had at our council meeting. So over to you, Mr. Van Horn.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was just voted on and approved by council at the meeting on Monday night, and I don't have them committed to memory yet, so I'll just read them here. That gender and diversity and inclusivity training be offered to council and staff. I'll come back to that one in a moment. That staff be directed to integrate gender inclusive and gender neutral language where possible in key communications and printed electronic materials, and that staff be encouraged to use personal pronouns where staff are comfortable making the individual choice to do so. So regarding initially the training, the city has offered EDI training previously through an annual training calendar that we put out to the organization, and actually other organizations call us because they know that we produce one. So we do offer training to external, a lot of other municipalities will send people. So this has been a course that has been offered before. It's been a half-day session that's been put on. What's the thinking here, though, is that it's going to be a little more targeted. What we found when talking about this issue at our senior leadership team, because the recommendation came from the committee to council to the senior leadership team, is we identified that we had a very different baseline understanding of EDI in general, and it made getting any traction, getting started quite challenging actually, because if you look at a lot of people in our rec facilities and parks, rec and culture, they're way further down the path here. They've been doing this training for staff. I know dealing with Lynn Wark and Laura Clarkson here too, just hearing some of the different training that's already been provided. It's leaps and bounds beyond what we're talking about here. This is designed to be sort of this baseline understanding type training so that we'll collectively as an organization be able to speak a little more competently on this and feel a little more comfortable with it. With the pronoun usage, that was something that it's a sensitive area, and what I know from my human resources and labor relations careers, when you're going to put in a workplace rule, you need to make sure that rule is enforced. And if you're not going to get to the point of actually firing somebody for not doing it, then you need to really consider whether you have this rule in place or not. And the thought of we're going to terminate somebody for not putting out their pronouns, just felt it was probably a little too far at this point. I think we have a lot of initiatives at the city where they start as smaller grassroots movements. We've seen a lot of Pink Shirt Day, Orange Shirt Day. These things start as initiatives that grow in time. And even just seeing around here, the number of individuals on this call who have put their pronouns out, it's moving in that direction. I come from a time when, and I deal a lot with collective agreements, for example, when we just, in the last round of bargaining, took our firefighter collective agreement and went through, there were 41 different instances where we had identified it was he/she in there that we managed to get those out. And that's been something that's been long standing for a while. But until the issue comes forward and is raised, and I think council, even through striking this committee, has really sort of signaled to staff where the thinking is going. So, but until the issue is raised, a lot of times it's not thought about, because if you get a lot of individuals like me around the table when we're bargaining, it's not necessarily something that leaps to mind. And so I think this has been a great evolutionary step for us here, and there's going to be more to come through it. I think that and just earlier I was on here, but you might have saw me looking down, is because we are drafting the message to go out to staff that's going to come from our CAO, hopefully tomorrow, or at least by the end of this week, to advise staff about the motions of council, and just here's what that's going to look like, and then we can start identifying what the training is going to look like, and how we can inform people enough about this so when they see pronouns, they're going to understand what they're there for and why you might choose to do it. I think that for a lot of people, I say ignorance, but it's not ignorance in a negative sense. It's just they don't know what they don't know yet. I know even for me, when it first came out, I was like, what are we talking about? I'm a 50-year-old cisgender Caucasian male here. And it can be quite unnerving, actually, to jump into a world that you don't know the terminology. And I think what we're hoping to do through this is get more people who are willing, after that initial reticence to sort of say, okay, what are we talking about? I can inform myself a little better about this. And if they choose to do it, we would encourage them to do so. But if they're not going to do so, we're not going to badger them or hector them for not doing it. It's got to be a personal choice. It really comes down to creating the environment where people are going to feel comfortable doing this. And I think that will be a fairly significant shift for the organization. So maybe I'll stop prattling on now and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, John, or Mr. Van Horn. Are there any questions? Deborah.
I'd just like to thank you so much. It sounds like there's been some thorough conversations happening. I really appreciate your honesty and your being so forthright with some of the struggles. I think that those are being had in many organizations everywhere. And so I appreciate the step forward that you're taking. And I also appreciate that sometimes, we need to take change in chunks. And I do support the gender inclusivity and the whole thing, but I really appreciate the steps you're taking. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Adrian.
Thank you so much. John, I want to thank you as well. And I also want to thank Sarah for bringing these all forward in Pride 2021. I wanted to say that I can totally relate when you're talking about being 50 and cisgendered, because that's me too. And one thing that I am noticing as my children, come up is that we're playing catch up. To what they know already. I mean, I've got one in elementary school, one just starting high school, and I mean, I know they would be like, why is the city actually even talking about this right now? And so we are playing catch up, and that's a good thing. And I'm so pleased that you've come and you provided this report. I'm curious to know if we as a committee would be able to be copied on the message you send out to staff, just to see the messaging that you send around these motions that came from the committee. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. I'll make sure that I communicate that with our CAO, just to make sure that it's that sort of final bit of feedback. And interesting, if I may just share a personal story as well, how we're catching up with our children. I've got a daughter who just turned 21 on Monday. And when she was going out to university for the first time, she got to meet her roommate Madeline on this sort of meet your roommate thing. And in the 2 months between then and going to school, she said, "Dad, my roommate is Matthias, same individual, transitioning, and they go by the personal pronouns they." And instantly, I was like, if I don't want to alienate my daughter, I need to get on this right away. And when it's like going out for dinner, are they going to be joining us? And I was able to flip into it. And I've been updating her on what I've been doing with this, and just to see the pride my daughter has in me. It's because I want to do this. I like it.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. We will move on to item B, and we're going to have Lynn Moore. Now we're getting to our LEAP program and our proposed changes for fall of 2022. So Lynn, take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I'm simply going to introduce Laura Clarkson, who has done all the research and will be presenting the report.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight with this report. What we're asking for today is your support in moving forward with a few of the recommendations that came from the LEAP review that was done previously. As you know, we identified quite a few recommendations to improve the LEAP report with the goal to reduce barriers and increase participation. And we were able to implement a few of the recommendations already. And now we feel it's time to take a step forward to implement a few more. So today I'm hoping that you will support the recommendation that we allow certain folks who are already approved through another level of government or government program. They already have their financial situation scrutinized by another government agency or level of government, that they would be able to apply for a LEAP pass without having to show their notice of assessment, that we would take that as an alternate application, as an alternate approval option. And also further to that, that the folks that fall under this category would be able to have their LEAP pass for 2 years instead of 1. So
thank you. And me personally, I love these recommendations. I think whatever we can do to make it longer and easier. The question I have before I get in anybody else was, how do we communicate these programs? Do we have brochures? How do we let everybody know?
We do. We have brochures and we have it online. We are planning to do a big marketing campaign. And also one of the other recommendations that we want to bring forward as well is bringing back referral agencies and building a list of community partners. But as we're phasing these recommendations in, we want to make sure that we get our steps in place and not do too much too soon. So right. That will be in the future. Once we get these folks up and running, the agency and partnership and marketing would actually be our next round of the review recommendations.
Perfect, thank you. And I see Lynn up with her hand, and then Deborah. And just so everybody knows, this will need a motion to be made for this particular recommendation. Lynn.
Well, you just stole my thunder because that's what I was going to remind the committee, that we do need a recommendation to take this to council because it does require an update to our LEAP policy.
Thank you. Deborah.
Just quickly would like to underscore the having local nonprofits be part of your marketing plan. I know many of the families that come into Nanaimo Family Life, utilize this program. We could do a heck of a job in getting this word out. And I think that's just a really important part of the process. So thank you so much.
I'm hoping so too. I agree 100%. And Rachel.
Hi, I might have a really not very intelligent question. I'm sorry, but I was reading.
There's no such thing.
The new policy that we're going to make a motion on, and it says BC income assistance. Now, does that include people on income assistance and people on disability, provincial disability, or is it just people on income assistance?
At this point, it's just people on income assistance. These 5 programs were chosen to represent children and families and seniors, and CLBC would be folks with developmental disabilities. But we absolutely, if there's other programs that we can consider moving forward, I could see this list of 5 growing in the future for sure. I wanted to start with 5 to represent a variety of different demographics in the community, but absolutely. And on that note also, Rachel, if there's other programs out there that you're aware of that you'd like to bring forward, we'd be open to hearing about other ones as well.
I'm sorry, I assumed income assistance would mean, because it's a government program, anybody that's a person with disabilities. So are we saying this wouldn't include, because they're on limited income. I have friends that are people with disabilities. If they're on income assistance, which the old phrase I think used to be welfare, why wouldn't we give it to people with disabilities?
Well, if they're on the program, they would. So I'm not sure if I answered Rachel's question correctly. So not to alarm anyone, but if they're qualified for that program, whether they're on disability or not, they would qualify.
Oh, income, anybody on a low income that's receiving the government supplement. That's what I thought in the beginning. And then I thought we were excluding them. I was like, what?
No. Sorry, that's probably my fault for the way I answered that. But if they're on the program for whatever reason that they've qualified for that, then they would be able to apply for a LEAP card without having to show their notice of assessment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Jocelyn.
That answered part of my question too. It sounds like it's those 5 are the things that would make them able to get like a longer renewal and not have to show you another form of income validation. Is CPPD on that list? Like Canadian Pension Program Disability?
CPPD is not. The GIS is the Guaranteed Income Supplement for Seniors. That's a federal program. So I don't know if it's the same and there's been a recent name change. I can look into that one as well, Jocelyn.
Yeah, I would suggest, because it's, if you're disabled, i.e. unable to work but not eligible for PWD, some people have CPPD and it doesn't cover any of your medical costs. So you're even though you get like $100 more a month than PWD, you are like way further behind. So they would also be low income, and I think permanently, you have to be permanently disabled. So I think that would fall under the group of organization or group of programs that would be eligible for not having to always prove their income.
Great, thank you for that.
So do I have anybody? Jocelyn, are you wishing to move it? Okay, moved by Jocelyn. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Rachel. Adrian, did you wish to speak?
No, I was seconding.
Okay, perfect. Do I have any further questions? Seeing Sandra. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. I am curious, and it's kind of a bit of scope creep, so that's why I didn't enter it in before we voted on it. I think this is to do with the pass for low income for recreation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And what I was curious about is there any anything established with the city for maybe Ukrainian families coming to the community?
Refugee programs is in it. It's included.
Perfect, because I have a family coming soon. So
okay.
Selfishly.
No further questions. I will call the question. All those in favor? Is there any opposed to this? I do not see any opposed, so motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Well done. And then item number 8, Lynn.
Thank you. I am going to try and share my screen here. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
So this is called a Moby mat. And the Parks crew has just installed one down at Departure Bay Beach. And they were just informing us about it today.
Oh.
And they're not 100% sure if the way they have it all set up is completely accessible, and it might need to be moved around or tweaked a little bit. But one of our parks staff suggested that perhaps somebody from this committee might be willing to connect with him and come down and try this out and give him some feedback as to whether or not it's set up properly. So I just wanted to let the committee know that. And then if you're interested, we can connect you with Tony Clift. I forget his exact job title, but he works on the Parks crew.
Jocelyn.
I would be happy to do that. I'm a manual chair user though, so I would suggest someone with a heavier chair also attend, because the heavier ones can sometimes like buckle mats when they turn. So
okay, so Jocelyn is one volunteer.
I'm seeing Rachel's hand up.
I was actually going to ask, maybe the committee knows someone that they'd like to ask to go down, because like I have a power chair, but it's a really light one, like it's not a normal style, so maybe someone could recommend someone else to go down.
Cheryl?
Maybe we could ask Linda Dirksen, that used to be on our committee, because she's got a very heavy chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that she's stepped back, but she may be interested, especially with her portfolio at VIU.
Perfect.
Well, I think between Laura and I, we can probably make those two connections.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Adrian.
I just wanted to say another thank you. And I would have loved to have suggested my brother-in-law to go down and try it out with his MS, the exhaustion level, just, to get packed up and go somewhere and try. I know that that would kind of take him out of the running for that. But once we know it works with a heavier chair or scooter, I mean, it's one of our biggest difficulties as a family, is finding a place that we can all go to the beach and access the beach. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't believe we have anything further on our agenda, and I'm assuming we don't have any questions from citizens in the SARC room.
No,
Since I don't
Councillor
think there are any. Just checking. Then I need a move for adjournment. We get to enjoy the sunshine. Moved by Cheryl, seconded by Adrian. All those in favor, yay! Enjoy the evening.
Good night, all.
Good
Thank you,
night.
Hannah, for your presentation. That was really good.
Bye.
Thanks.